Welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the place where you can learn how to create a dental practice and a business life that you love. Listen in with Dr. David Moffet as he interviews successful entrepreneurs and successful business people and successful dentists as they share their business successes, their stories, and their breakthrough ideas, sharing pearls of wisdom that you can take back to your practice and implement immediately so that you can have that great practice with more patients, higher profits, and less stress. This is the podcast where great dental practices meet with successful business processes. Thanks for tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the podcast where thought leaders, industry experts, and thriving practice owners reveal their very best tips, tools, and strategies that will help you grow your dental practice faster. Now, here's your host, Dr. David Moffet.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. David Moffet. It is Thursday morning in Australia, and that means that for my guest, it is Wednesday evening, where he is in Dallas, Texas. We have Dr. David Phelps, the founder of Freedom Founders, and he's in Dallas. David and I have known each other since, I think, 2011, 2012, and it's great to catch up again. David, welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Well, it's a treat to be here, David. As you said, we have had a long-term relationship, knowing each other for many years, and we've visited each other both here in the States and down under, and I've enjoyed knowing you and Jane and all the great work you've done. You're very inspirational, and I appreciate being here.
Well, David, it's been a few years because of COVID that I haven't been to the US. That's it used to be my primary thing. I think I visited the US 57 times in a 10-year period, which is a lot. Still didn't chalk up. I think I chalked up 27 states, so that's a few. Probably been to Cleveland more times than most Americans. And I'm proud of that. But Sydney to Dallas was the staple flight, so it was often great to catch up with you, even passing through. And I remember one time we were delayed because of a storm. We were going to the East Coast, and we had to overnight it in Dallas. And you reached out as to whether Jane and I needed anything because our luggage was in hold, and we just had our carry-on luggage. And that was great. And that's the kind of friendships that I've been able to develop over the years of traveling since 2007 to the US. Friendships like this one with you, where we know each other and we can get on the phone and we can have a chat about anything and get some advice if needed. So again, great to catch up. And tell me what's going on at the moment with the dental profession in terms of their ability to retire comfortably, because I know that was the basis of the Freedom Founders, helping dentists to plan for their retirement so they could enjoy their retirement years. I remember Omar Reed telling me in 2010 that 95% of dentists reach the age of 65 and can't afford to retire, and so have to keep on drilling because they haven't put enough money away, or they've spent too much, or they haven't earned enough. And then they come up with this whole, I just love work, so I just like to keep working, which of course we know, nobody loves that. I've never yet to walk through a cemetery and see he wished he'd spent more time at the office on a tombstone. It just doesn't happen. So, no. David, has it changed? Are dentists looking after themselves better financially, or is it still a hot mess?
Yeah, not a lot's changed. When Omar made his stats back in the day, at age 65, couldn't really retire comfortably. It's not because most dentists don't earn enough. It's they don't keep enough, and what they keep, they don't understand how to invest it. Because look, everybody's busy. Everybody's focused on family and the business, which they should. Clinical skills, what's new there? It's a lot to keep up with. And I think there's a tendency that's been kind of drilled into people's minds that Wall Street, financial markets is the place to have your money taken care of for you. You find an advisor, a money manager, and here in the States, our qualified retirement plans are, for almost the most part, are all put somewhere on Wall Street. And I'd say that the stats have changed in the last, I think, since COVID. Yeah, I think the stats are the ADA, American Dental Association, has put out stats that say that the number now is age 69, where dentists reached where the ability to retire under their terms, meaning maintain a certain lifestyle that one expects to maintain or whatever that is, they're finding difficulty doing it. And yeah, it goes back to the fact that most dentists make good money, provide well for their family lifestyle, and provide that and security and stability, which is our number one goal while we're in that phase. But the problem I see is with any income earner, whether it's doctors, dentists, whatever your hourly take is there's a lack, or kind of complacency about the fact that someday that's going to run out. Meaning your desire or ability, maybe involuntarily, something causes one to have to leave that ability to make that money, to trade the time for dollars, and then where are we? Because we haven't really planned for what I call replacement income. Replacement income derived from the investments, the assets that one creates over years. Part of that's the equity from the sale of a practice, right? Well, where do you put that? And I think most people, again, get caught up in the financial markets. I'm not saying don't put money there, but who learns anything by investing in the financial markets? You don't learn anything. Maybe discipline, but outside of that, and the marketplace is very volatile and chaotic today. So that's kind of answering your question as to where things are. I'd still say, yeah, overall, it's still a hot mess. I mean, everything's in sectors. There are people that do very, very well, and they put their money aside in wherever they put it. But that's a relatively small sector. And it's kind of amazing to think of the lifestyles that people live, and it's all of a sudden, well, why don't you have any money? I was talking to a doctor and his wife this afternoon. Still loves doing dentistry. Raised 4 kids, 3 still in college, and no issues, no health issues. But to your point, it's like, well, when do you want to start to exit? He said, well, 4 to 7 years would be about right. Perfect. He's 58. Okay, that's kind of in line with the 65-year retirement. Let's see what you've got to work with. Well, I got my practice when I sell it. Okay, well, that's still going to be out there. I have a commercial building. Awesome, good for you. And I have my home. Well, what else? Well, that's it. And the total that you added up, the total is maybe a couple $1 million. I'm thinking, okay, 30 years in what, 20, 30, $40 million coming through your hands, through your practice. And that's what's left of it. And part of that is in your home, which you're going to have a home somewhere, right? So that's in essence the problems that I see, come up for hardworking, high income earners.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was very fortunate to have an accountant to have me start setting money aside in a superannuation fund, as they're called down here. You call them 401ks in the US, and putting in as much as I possibly could up to the tax deductible limit, which was huge back in the day, and even under our second longest serving Prime Minister, John Howard, he still had a plan where we were going to be able to put in, I think, $100,000 a year as tax deductible to put that in, which was huge. But then when his government lost, that got cut in half, then it got cut in half again, and then got cut in half again. And I remember talking to another dental coach about his business partner. And he didn't mention names, but I knew who he was talking about because I had known this dentist from the Australian Dental Association. He said the guy, basically spent everything, and his retirement was sell his house in Sydney, move down the coast, and do dentistry down the coast still. So still didn't even have enough asset to retire on. And that, I guess, David, is the real tragedy. Now, part of the tragedy, you touched on it there very briefly, but I know from working and being a trusted advisor in the early days of Freedom Founders that there were dentists who got burnt with poor advice. And, were told this is where you need to put your money, and that didn't eventuate into anything. And they had to totally rejig what they were thinking. But through Freedom Founders, I know some of those dentists were able to create a nest egg that then generated an income that got them back to where they should have been and were able to retire and not have to work. Because you also mentioned there, provided you're healthy.
Yeah.
And that terminated my career. Arthritis in my hands. Even now, every time I drop something, it's just because I just don't. My thumbs are basically there as ornaments. And if I'm in a hurry and I don't think, I drop things, just bottles, jars. It's okay in the kitchen because I can't carry two plates to the table at one time. Every plate has to be carried with two hands. But it is a debilitating condition that I didn't think that I would have had if we were talking in 2010. No sign of it at all. So
Right.
You don't know what's around the corner, and that's why you need to plan like an oak tree. When's the best time to plant it? 20 years ago. You need to start planning 20 years ago for your retirement.
Yeah, I tell younger docs that are years away from thinking about any exit, but I tell them you need to be planning your exit even now, at least building the constructs for it, because I said the sooner you can get to what I call work optional, meaning you have enough assets, you put yourself in that position, and thankfully you did because you had discipline, you had an advisor that you took advantage of, as you should, of what was offered back then, and you maximized it. So you built up a strong base so that when you couldn't practice anymore, you had the ability to pivot without any constraints. Most docs don't do that, and so some event happens and they're not ready for it. They don't have enough disability insurance, perhaps, or whatever it may be, to provide what their needs are. And again, most people will ratchet up their lifestyle to match or even exceed what they're taking in, because as long as you can go to work and you're a productive dentist, you can still make up. You can make up for the deficit. You can put things on credit when interest rates are lower and do those kind of things and get away with it. But getting away with something doesn't mean it's a plan. It's a system, right? And the wake-up call is when something does happen, or you finally wake up one day and go, I'm tired, I'm burned out on this, and how quickly can I exit? I mean, I hear that a lot of times too. It's like docs that are still healthy, but they're nearing the latter stages of age 50s and into their 60s, and they can still do it, but man, they're just burnt out. They've done all they want to do, and yet they're still stuck, having to do it, as you said, like your friend who had to, quote, retire in practice. Which, if you love it, you've got a runway there, then you can, quote, retire in practice. But not a whole lot of people feel like that's the model they want to do. So yes, you've got to start early, build a plan as you're building your practice model, building your family life, building what your wealth building is going to look like. And the sooner you start with that, the faster those effects will compound and give you that work optional, ideally way before age 58 or 65. How about work optional by age 40? It's very doable. It's very doable, but most people say, "Oh, no, retirement age, that's not to my 60s, and my financial advisor, has got this plan." It's like, well, fine, but what if you could do it sooner? Doesn't mean you have to. But I found, as I'm sure you have found, David, that a lot of hardworking docs, when the pressure's off and they actually don't have to do it or see certain kinds of procedures, patients, or deal with insurance or whatever it might be, when they don't have to do those things, then actually dentistry becomes fun again. But you've got to put yourself in that position where you're not under the stress to have to make things happen all the time, like we do when we're young and getting started.
Sometimes, David, the dentist doesn't realize how much stress they are under and how tightly wound they have become from the practice of dentistry and the stresses of lifestyle or income or just even personal goals that they set that are a big stretch for them. Just before COVID, Jane and I did a trade show for I helped her at a dental trade show down here in Sydney, and the stand beside hers was a dental equipment repair guy. And he said, I used to call on your practice. He said, the difference between you now, this is in 2020, than when I used to call on your practice 8 years ago. He said, you are a completely different person because you're not practicing dentistry.
Right.
And yet I would have thought that I was the same person.
Mm.
But obviously I had unwound. But it's not just dentists. You know, as a dentist, we get to see people pass through various stages of their lives. And I can remember taking on a patient who was retiring as an obstetrician, and he was very tightly sprung. But, as the years went by, he became more of a human being. And that's got to affect your life expectancy, I think, although we don't think it does. You can't always keep something tightly wound because it's going to break.
Right.
And so you're right, getting that plan in place early so that you have those options early. And I love what you said. Like, sure, it's like you ask your patients, do you want me to do this procedure in 90 minutes or 60 minutes? They never say, is it cheaper in 60? They just go, just do it as quick as you can, doc. And so why wouldn't you want to be financially secure as quickly as you can? What do they say when they say, they're lying when they say, I love working. They've got to be.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's a lot of that too, that I think, to have to admit something that you don't want to admit publicly, or certainly to, your spouse or your family, because, we're taking care of our spouse and our family means we have to kind of show up and act like we got it together. Right. Even though when we don't, because we don't want them to fear that there's something bad going on with us. So yeah, I've been there. I've been there in life. And yes, I think there's a part of that. It's like, you have to just say something like, oh, it's all good. Yeah. I love what I do. Well, the reality is, you love certain parts of what you do. There's certain parts that you just absolutely can't stand. And so what's the ratio there? Nothing's ever perfect. There's no perfect, but can you change the ratio of what you like or love to do versus what you don't like? And, that's a lot of what you do with the ultimate dental experience. That's making that journey in practice something that's sustainable and not going to burn you out or keep you tightly wound. That's a big part of it, I think, and part I do is just try to give some confidence in some level of certain milestones that people could actually accurately measure and know where they are, even if they're still 10, 15 years out from thinking they might want to retire. But at least if you know where you are, you can make changes. Maybe you speed that up for whatever reason, or you take more time off along the way. I don't need to work, 4 days a week. I can cut back, or I have the opportunity in the margin to maybe try an associate, and that's a whole new model and it takes a reinvestment, but hey, I've got the margin to do that. I mean, now you've got some flexibility in your life. And I think that's the problem when you're running, at top gear and just, high RPMs all the time. There's no margin to try anything. And you feel like if I make one little move left or right, or I don't fire that, I use the word Jane a lot. I want to use Jane because that's too close to home. So let's call it Miriam. So, Miriam's been with you for 20 years and Miriam knows everything. I don't dare fire Miriam, yet Miriam's probably the cog that's causing the problems. I know I'm going down rabbit trails here that you deal with all the time, but that's the point of having margin in your life, that we're not running at the height of the height. And now you can try things that maybe would reduce the stress in all aspects of your life.
You raise a good point, David, because in terms of trying to get dentists to look at the future, they're very much just focused on the present, and for them, they don't want to admit that the present could be better, because they're dentists. They were smart enough to get into dental school. They were smart enough to get through dental school. They were smart enough to get a practice of their own. In the back of their mind or in the front of their mind, they're saying, I'm smart enough that I don't need advice. I can work this out for myself. And that's, there's always advice, and most advice is going to give you a better way than trying to work things out for yourself. How many people nowadays go driving without turning on Siri navigation?
Yeah, right. Right.
Because it gives you the quickest way. It tells you how many minutes to where you're going to be. And it's not, this is the way we always used to go.
Here's
but
what I found.
Oh, Siri's talking to me now because I mentioned her. How rude.
That's right. You gotta be careful who's listening in on these conversations. That, yeah, you're right. It's funny. You talk about, that navigation, and most guys, including myself for sure, is my wife used to be my navigator, right? I don't know if you ever experienced that with Jane or not, but I'd be going somewhere, and I want to do it myself, because that's who I am, and I'm not the best navigator. I'll say this: I'll make wrong turns, wrong moves, and my wife Candace will just, she'll just say, over there, turn there, and I'm still weaving around the parking lot. So there's a lot of what you said about, we don't want to appear weak or vulnerable. It's like, I can do this myself because I've done everything in my life up to this point and done it myself, and good for you. But you're right. If you want to take the next level up, whatever that means to you in your practice, in your finances, in your time off with your family, if you want to take the next level up, however you define that, then being around or working with the guidance of other people who have been there, done that, yeah, that's the best investment you can make at that period in your life, because trial and error will only get you so far, and trial and error cost has a time and a monetary invoice to pay. Well, I'd rather pay that to somebody who can speed me through this process and keep me more aligned, so I'm not stepping off left and right, into the mud pits and having to pull myself out every time and go, well, that wasn't a good move. Well, if somebody's there to guide me, well, just like we learned going through dental school, right? I mean, the first time we were turned loose, on the clinic floor after we'd gone through didactic and working on lab mannequins and that kind of thing, you still had, a professor, somebody with experience, like looking over your shoulder, and checking out the steps, because we needed that, and we weren't, even close to competent to go do it ourselves. So why do again? You're right. Why do highly trained, specialized, intelligent, hardworking professionals think, well, I can figure out, all these other aspects myself? Well, if you've got all the time in the world, you got lots of time, then go for it. But I say, man, time is something you can't buy back. So when at a certain point in life, it's time to reinvest in yourself and find people that can take you that next step that you're looking for.
Time's a really big factor in that decision and investing too, David, just as it is in terms of getting advice in growing your practice. And our friend Simon Bowen has a great model about that at this point in time now, today, right where we are, is the closest you're going to be to where you want to be. And in a year's time, you're going to be further away if you do nothing. It's the analogy is if you fall out of a ship and you're in the water, the ship keeps going and you're still there. So you're further, as time goes by, you're further away from the ship. Sometimes people think that miraculously they can stay alongside the path they're meant to go and the distance will be the same. It's not the same in investment. It's compound interest is yes. The term used to start early, because it works on itself. And it's the same with advice. It's in growing a business and in growing a nest egg is that the mistakes have been made by other people and they prevent you or they guide you not to make those mistakes. And so it is a shortcut. And sometimes you can't beat that into people's minds with a stick or a baseball bat, can you?
No. Sometimes, it's often said that when the student is ready, the teacher, the guide, the mentor will appear. But you can't, as much as we all like to, kind of shake people sometimes and say, oh, if only you knew what you're missing here, that the clues are right in front of you. But if someone's not ready, you just can't force it. Just like you can't make a kid, a child, they've got to learn through some experience, and sometimes you have to skin some knees and that kind of thing, and that's part of the process.
Yeah, it's and the other thing is, we've all had bad advice. I remember going one of my first financial advisors was a dentist who became a financial advisor, and I said, you're too focused on the Australian stock market. You need to spread into world markets. And the Australian dollar dropped 20%. And so my investment in the world market was ridiculously low. And I said, I can't see it getting any lower than this. Right. I said, I just need to close that out and just avoid it. And somebody said to me that as a financial advisor, this guy was a better dentist than he was a financial advisor, and yet he switched from dentistry to financial advisor. But he became known as the guy to see. And sometimes I think have you found that in dental advisors, the accountant that everybody uses in dentistry isn't really that much smarter than he's no smarter and probably less as smart than a really good accountant who knows a lot of industries and sees a lot more broad-based stuff.
Exactly. I think broad-based is what we're really getting at here, and that someone who's too specialized can't bring the benefit of having worked with clients in various industries, because there's so much you learn from the outside. So yeah, I'm not necessarily a fan of, and I'm not saying that some dental accountants, CPAs are not very good at what they do, but you're right. I don't think you choose somebody based on that criteria alone. I think you've got to really parse that a little bit more and understand what the benefits are, or maybe aren't, in being that selective.
Yeah, it's nice to go chasing the big returns, but as you know, the bigger the return, the bigger the risk in investing, and so each investor has to know their comfort zone and what they're willing to risk and what they're willing to sit on. And even in retirement now, as I am now, I'm old enough to pull all my money out if I wish. My advisor said, well, we're just going to rejig and take some cash and then rejig the other back into growth again, as opposed to being conservative. I said, sounds all right to me.
Asset investment allocation is a big part of the puzzle, and you're absolutely right. There's different stages in our life when growth makes a lot of sense, and if you've got more time to allow the compounding of growth while you're still in active income, you don't need the actual distributions, the cash, the liquidity from your investment accounts, then growth is a great thing. And you typically pay less in tax on growth than you do on actual distributions today. You have to also consider where we are in the economic cycle, and then in that, even, what assets am I investing in that fit? Do they fit in the cycle? That's what's really changing right now, heavily in front of us, is that the models that a lot of people got kind of used to, that that worked relatively well coming out of the GFC back 2008, 2009, that we all experienced to some extent. We had this long run where financialization of the marketplace, low interest rates for many, many years, allowed for assets, overall financial tangible assets, to really move to some higher heights. We still got that to a great degree, as you know, in the financial markets, particularly in the tech arena today, but we saw it in real estate too. So again, you can't time the market, but understanding, to your point, how much to allocate in these areas. Yeah, I think we all need some growth and protection against inflation. We're going to have that. That's going to be here. How much, where today to put that? How much do I need in actual more predictable, sustainable income that's not necessarily growth oriented, but it's actually just producing income? How much do I need to keep in kind of a moat, an insurance, a protection mode, which might be just close at hand? Here we put money in the U.S. Treasuries, or you could precious metals, or whatever you like that keeps it close to the vest. These are the allocations that are important, and most financial advisors, definitely understand those. I think the key is, do you have enough diversification, broadly based, where it makes sense for you? And again, financial markets is definitely a place. I think there's a place in tangible assets. Could be, passive investments in businesses, dental practices, if that's something well. Real estate, certainly. Commodities come into place, and then where do you put the asset allocation for the insurance against everything just going to pot, right? What do I still got there that has some tangible, real value that isn't going to be decimated by the fiat currency that we're all playing ball with today?
Yeah, back in the days when I used to come along to your Freedom Founders, you were very focused on helping dentists invest in income-producing real estate, and that getting that regular rental income out of stable property to, as you just said, to provide that that income as an insurance, and to build that rental income as a replacement for your dental time for money equation that you were doing. So is that still a good, I guess, as the market is headed towards a correction, every second person is saying there's a correction coming. They just can't tell us when it's going to be or how big it's going to be. But is real estate still a good hedge against that?
Well, real estate has also the equity markets in real estate, whether that's a rental property or investing in, syndicated equities, pooling your money, have come across more difficult times because of the rise in interest rates. Higher cost of capital reduces that net operating income that we talked about, that we want reliability. Also, we have seen massive spikes in the cost of insurance, property taxes, all taking a bigger bite out of the net operating income that we want from these assets. So that's causing, as you would guess, valuations that need to come down. And we're seeing that in the commercial real estate markets in different sectors. Housing over here, certainly in some pockets that had a greater rise post-COVID, are seeing greater drops. And I think we're going to see more of that. So corrections are coming in the real estate equity markets. Again, different locales, different sectors. So to your question, does that model still hold up today? It's very difficult to have that make sense. If you own something that you picked up, back 4 or 5 years ago or before, likely with the right financing, or maybe it's paid off now, it's well operated, well managed. Yeah, it's a good asset. Carry it through. But today, one has to be very careful about when is investing in equities, particularly using leverage, which is typically what we do in equities. We use leverage. Well, now you got higher interest rates. Has the equity valuation market, has it come down enough to balance against the higher interest rates? Well, it's still coming down. So when's the right place to strike? That's where I say the dynamism of the marketplace really requires some discernment today, knowing when it's time to go back into the growth model, which is equities. I'm a little bit, askance from that right now. I've reallocated my allocations over the last, let's say, 18 to 24 months, moving more so out of, when I have the opportunity to, into more private credit, which is in the financial markets, that would be like investing in bonds, private credit and collateralized by real estate. Though we can still get low double-digit returns. It's safer, it's more predictable, but it doesn't have the growth. So again, I've got to still balance, but I've got to kind of wait and watch the right time to go back into the growth side to hedge the inflation. So the rental property thing that was good when you were with us, 6, 7, 8 years ago, yeah, not so much today. Okay. It'll come back. Yeah, it'll come back. But today, no, I wouldn't go there today, because it just does not produce the net income, the return on investment that it did, because of the higher interest rates and higher valuations. And I think there's still some decreasing valuations that will come over time. And it's like, well, then why would I invest there now? I'm going to wait. And then I'll know kind of basically when to go back in when those numbers reallocate.
People always need housing in residential, but down here, the government doesn't have to fix toilets, doesn't have to fix broken windows, doesn't have to chase delinquent tenants. It's the owner who has to do that, and yet the government takes a nice big chunk of the profit. Thanks for doing all that. We'll take half your profit straight away. It's kind of like, it's not really fair. If you're going to take half the profit, do half the work.
Yeah.
So it is a deterrent, but people do need somewhere to live, and people do need places to operate a lot of businesses from. There are a lot of people now operating businesses from home. That's one thing that COVID did, is change the whole workplace dynamic. Have you got that in cities in the US where they only work 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, same thing here is we started out, in COVID, coming out of COVID, where, majority of people were working from home. And then little by little, particularly in the last year, there's been a big callback. Some of the larger companies, Google, Amazon. I know Jeff Bezos. Who else? They've had some major callbacks, and people who don't want to come back, they're basically saying, "See ya." So we're seeing much more of that. It came out this fall during the political campaigns that our own government employees, that some ridiculous low percentage actually showed up in any office space, and how much largesse there is in supporting a work environment structure that is not producing anything. It's just mind-boggling. So since the inauguration a couple of weeks ago, I don't know how much you hear, but Elon Musk has joined forces with Trump to create the Department of Governmental Efficiency, and they're going in and slashing and burning big time, and weeding out and offering buyouts on a lot of government employees, just saying, hey, here's an offer for you. If you take it in the next 2 weeks, we'll pay you so much. Separation, good luck, nice having you. We'll see you. And so there's a lot going on right now. Of course, a lot of people don't like it because who likes their entitlements taken away, right? When you can actually stay at home and, basically pretend like you're working. Things are changing. The culture is changing quite a bit right now over here.
So we've had a similar thing here with our left-wing government of the last 3.5 years. The only thing that's grown under their administration is the size of the public service, and it's grown dramatically. And yet everything, and inflation's grown. But other than that, everything else, everybody else is tightening their belt, and I think that unless there's something really drastically goes wrong down here, because they were a minority government elected, based on what Trump did, which was just answer the call of the American people, we're hurting, as opposed to throwing concerts and ignoring them. I think that people have had enough of hurting. And yet, David, you and I are old enough to have lived through really high inflation periods that haven't been seen for 30 years.
Right.
28% is what I paid on my business loan when I bought my practice in 1987. 28%.
28. I hadn't heard that high.
I had paid 17.5% on my home loan. That was capped, and but 28% on my. It was only a $60,000 loan, but it was still 75% of my business to buy. 28%. So when they start screaming, "Oh, interest rates are high at 6%," I'm going.
Yeah, you can tell them what really tough times were. Yeah.
Back in my day, yes, old man.
Back in my day, look, I had very formidable forces that were working against us. Yeah, we're going through some significant global changes, and that's why we see so many similarities between our respective countries and what we've experienced, and as you said, with higher inflation and the public sector growing so much largesse there, and as you're probably aware to some degree, the debt and deficit spending that our government does over here in the U.S. only because we have the reserve currency of the dollar. How long does that last, right? I mean, there's a lot of things on the table here that I think are at risk, and unfortunately, we know that politicians, left side, right side, conservative, or more liberal, are really in it for the short game, right? They're in it for themselves first, to protect themselves. What's best for our countries is down the line. I mean, if they can do anything there after they take care of themselves, then maybe, but that's never on the forefront. And that's why we're like in such a predicament that's not going to work out well. It's at some point there's going to be pain to be paid. I think for any country that's been doing what we've been doing over here, and I think even Trump is saying a little bit of that right now. He's not pretending like he can come in and fix everything and reduce the cost of living and inflation overnight, because you can't. There's going to be a price to be paid, and he's got 4 years to do what he can, and if the country's not strong enough to endure the pain, then they'll just vote for the other side, and we'll go back to entitlements and more debt spending. It's going to be interesting to see what happens.
It is, And David, you and I both know, I think it was Jim Rohn who said that there'll be people who'll be successful no matter which government is in. There'll be people who will grow their assets and grow their business, and it doesn't matter whether the left or the right are in government, they still manage to be successful because they have that mindset that it's up to them and not up to the government to give them assistance. And I think that, and it doesn't go, it's not just money, it's also your health as well. People who look after their health, as opposed to people who say, "Oh, well, when I get sick, it's the government's got to keep me alive." I don't think that. That's the biggest drain on any government. I think is keeping people alive. I think down here, the budget for keeping people alive in their last 6 months takes up more than half of the healthcare budget. Yeah, and a lot of those people are just sadly, they're past their their life. They're past their life expectancy. They're just buying a few extra months. But the doctors need to also be able to use those people to build their skills so that when they do get somebody who they can actually save, who can live a productive life, they've got the skills to do that. It's a tough decision. I think from our discussion, David, the big point is that the future starts today, and it's up to us as people and our clients and our friends to take responsibility for our future and not wait for a handout or wait for time, but to do things now. Get that plan in place and start planning your financial future, start planning your health, start planning your exit strategy. You mentioned, we touched on it very briefly, dentists to say, "Oh, well, down the track I plan to retire," and we see this all the time. When it's time to retire, their practice is a dinosaur, and they really should have been planning the sale of their practice from 7 or 8 years before when they want to. I know I was very lucky. My practice was unsellable. It was such a high producing practice. I didn't think any dentist could buy it, but in my mind, I knew that corporatization would come to dentistry because it had come to medicine. I said, it's got to come. And so when the knock on the door, the phone rang, I was ready for it. It wasn't like, should I? It was like, you're the person you're the only person you're the only people who can pay me what my practice is worth, more than another dentist could.
Right.
And so again, it's planning for that future event. David, anything you'd like to add to that? I've probably taken the summation the words out of your mouth, but it's the future is in everybody's hand, and it's up to them. Seek the right advice, be comfortable with it, and then start doing what needs to be done.
No, it's a great summation, and not much to add to that because it was well stated. I think you said it earlier. At the time to start making any of these additional plans is now. You may not know exactly what it's going to look like because it may be many years off, or maybe if you're thinking 2 or 3 years. But yes, you've got to start now to making these plans, finding the right people to help guide you through the iterations of the decision-making tree, reverse engineer to where you want it to look like when you do eventually leave practice, whether that's 3 years or 5 years or 7 or 10, and then bring it back to today and say, okay, what constructs need to be put in place, both within the practice model, within the financial model, so that those can come together and coalesce at that point. And again, ideally, even earlier to make it optional for you, but without planning, as I talked to a doctor this week, it's just, he said, the time just went by so fast. We both said it today to each other before we jumped on, is that, we hadn't seen each other in 5.5 years. It's like, where does the time go? It goes like that. And if you're not really planning ahead at some level, it's going to catch you, and then you wish you would have.
Yeah, it will catch you. And when it does catch you, it's not nice. It's not nice. Yeah, you're right. You wish you could have turned back time and done things differently. So Make that decision today. Viewers, listeners, start getting your financial plans in order and start making a plan for your retirement, because it's too late to think about it when you think you should. You should have been doing it 20 years ago. And if not 20 years ago, today is the best day. David Phelps, thank you very much for joining me on the Ultimate Dental Podcast. As always, it's great to see you and great to catch up. And certainly, if I'm passing through Dallas in the next couple of years, you'll be on my radar to catch up face to face. It has been too long. David, if anybody who's watching this video or listening to this podcast wants to get in touch with you, any of my American viewers, what's the best way?
Easiest way to do it, David, would be to go to freedomfounders.com. There's a place there to get information, to even book a little bit of a discovery call, just walk through some of the things we talked about today in a generalized sense to help people just even see where they stand before they decide what steps to take next.
Yeah. All right. Well, that again, I'm glad Freedom Founders is there for dentists today. It wasn't there when I started my plan, 30 something years ago. But it is a necessity that people have a plan and that they work that plan. And David Phelps is one of the good guys in dentistry, and you really need to see whether what he's doing is going to be a match for you in terms of building that wealth, so that you can walk away from being an income producer to enjoying your assets and enjoying your retirement, and not having to keep on working to sustain your lifestyle, because you can build the assets. David, thanks for being a guest on the Ultimate Dental Podcast.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you for being a part of our dental community and joining us each week on this incredible journey. If you found value in today's episode and you don't want to miss out on future episodes packed with expert insights and actionable strategies, here's how you can stay connected with us. Firstly, hit that subscribe button. Whether you're listening on your favorite podcast platform or watching on our website, subscribing ensures you'll never miss an episode. Secondly, share the love. If you know a fellow dentist or colleague who could benefit from the wisdom and knowledge that we share here, please share our podcast with them. Also, please share the podcast on your socials by simply clicking on the social icons wherever you view or listen to this podcast. Together, we can all do our bit to elevate the dental profession. And finally, stay engaged with us. We love hearing from you. Your questions, comments, and feedback fuel our mission to provide the best content for your professional growth, your personal growth, and for your practice growth. Remember, your journey to creating a dental practice and a business life that you love is our mission, and we're excited to be your trusted guide along the way. Thank you for being a part of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Until next time, keep smiling, keep striving, and keep on tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast.